Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here at several different time zones. Brooke, I know it's very early in the morning for you. Thank you for making the time to do this. So we start off with the last session on day one of City Scripts. It's titled From the Intimate to the Streets, Documenting Our Lives and Cities During COVID-19. The world through your window is quite apt for the year 2020. Some of us looked over a concrete jungle. Some had better views of nature, and others witnessed key moments that defined everything we've individually and collectively experienced this past year. This discussion with the Journal Collective, an established global photography collective of several hundred women, showcases works of women photographers from the US, India, Colombia, Indonesia, Thailand, Nepal, and Saudi Arabia. I'm going to hand it over now to Brooke Herbert, who's been instrumental in bringing this session to City Scripts. Thank you, Brooke, and over to you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. It is 5 a.m. for me in the US, so bear with me, I might be a little tired. So my name is Brooke Herbert, and I'm based in Portland, Oregon right now. And I'll talk more about myself and my work once several other panelists go, but we just kind of wanted to give you an introduction to what the journal is, first of all. So let me go ahead and start my. And can everyone see this okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So like I was saying, the journal is, as you gave an introduction already, a global photography collective that was kind of born during the pandemic. And it's over 400 plus women and women identifying photographers. And it started just as an Instagram, really, and a place for people to share work. And so what we're kind of going to be sharing today is a variety of really, really personal work, really intimate work. And then also some of us have also been photographers at newspapers during this time. So, you know, it was a year of unrest in a lot of places, of protest. So we'll be sharing some of that work as well. But I want to get started with everyone, but we do have a short little video to play that kind of introduces what the collective is. So I'll go ahead and play that for everyone to watch.
The Journal is a global collaborative project of more than 400 women photographers documenting their lives during the coronavirus pandemic. In mid-March, when it became evident that all of us were losing income and work opportunities, we turned the cameras on ourselves, our families, on intimate moments and private spaces. By focusing on collective personal and emotional experiences during this crisis, we bring nuance to the way the current pandemic is being covered. A platform from members from different countries was created to collaboratively push the boundaries of storytelling on social media. Members are organized into 45 groups, taking turns in posting their work on Instagram. Additionally, women editors are invited from various international publications, such as Time Magazine, Vogue Italy, Zaid Magazine, and others, to become part of our community and curate our work. As the pandemic shifts and evolves, we continue sharing intimate insights into our lives around the world.
so I think we want to just go ahead and get started. There are several of us to present. So how we're going to do this is each photographer is going to just share some of their work. So we'll probably go ahead and get started. Liliana is first. She's from Bogotá, Colombia, and she will start sharing some of her work. And then at the end, after all of us go, we can open it up for questions as well.
Hi everyone, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so are you looking at my screen? Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, I'm very excited to be here and I want to thank the City Scripts Festival, the Indian Institute for Human Settlements, Reka, Aisha, Akansha, Brooke, Charlotte Smith, and the whole Journal Collective. I'm Liliana Marisalde. I'm a Colombian documentary photographer and visual artist based in Bogotá. I'm interested in identity, memory, and territory issues generally linked to women and our strength. I usually mix documentary photography with staging based on life stories used as a vehicle to deepen the way in which social, political, and community situations are documented and understood. I'm interested in photography's vast potential for exploring personal and political history, often and through an intersectional and decolonial feminist perspective. Today, I'm going to show you some images and processes from different projects that I have been doing since the pandemic started. This talk will be like a journey across the ways in which myself as a photographer and as a person have been integrating this new way of living, and it is related with the mental process I went through accepting everything that is happening right now and coping with this through photography. So I have divided this talk into 4 small chapters, and I will read in some moments because English is not my first language, so I'm helping myself. The first thing I want to share with you is that my relationship with photography is very intuitive and in some ways emotional. I usually do very different works from one another, both in style and topics, but because I try to listen to myself a lot and I am always asking myself which can be the most honest way of approaching to each topic or situation. So sometimes I make more photojournalistic work, but sometimes I relate to issues that are globally important in a more personal way, and I end up working in intimate projects. So this is what happened to me since the pandemic started. So my first little chapter is time, and when COVID restrictions began in Colombia in March of last year, my inner necessity was not about going out and documenting what was happening in the streets, but I got the feeling to really go with the flow, with the restrictions, and also look inside myself. So because of the pandemic, I went to live again with my parents, also with both of my grandmas, after a long time of not living with them. This was an amazing family opportunity for me, but also this made me start working in a project which is still in process, about my 93-year-old grandma. Sharing with her so intensely was something that I had not done since my childhood, and this led me to ask myself so many questions about time, regarding the perception of time according to our age and the difference between human time and nature time. So I started this visual quest. This is in process, and I'm just going to show you these 3 images. This photo is about the 90-year-old difference between my grandmother and my succulent plant, and how the time of 2 beings converges. And this topic of the relativity of time between human beings and nature is also something I somehow relate with COVID, since the pandemic has generated environmental awareness for many of us, and in that sense, it has opened the door to understand a larger and elongated time that goes beyond our small human perception of time. I love to believe that thinking in this way maybe could lead us to connect in a kinder way with everything around us and stop being so focused on ourselves. So my second chapter and project I'm going to share with you today is Crisis. I started this project This project was also born from being at home with my family and being a bit subjected to a constant bombing of information about the COVID. I have not watched television for more than 10 years, and although I try to be well informed, I try not to listen to the news all the time. But since I was at their house, my family's house, TV and radio were constantly playing, and I began to feel overwhelmed by so much information, by the news about the disease, by the daily count of the sick and the deceased, by the constant repetition of the necessary precautions to be taken. And it was not about denying reality, but my reading that season was about going inward, about taking care of myself, taking care of my mental health, discovering the landscapes I have inside, unleashing my inner universe. So, connecting the outside and the inside, I decided to create new visions for the words that appear the most in the press and the media in the context of the virus. It was an attempt to renew myself and to discover the other parallel universes that these words can contain. These are some of the words. Cuarentena, which is quarantine. This was death. Crisis. But these images have emerged from silence and stillness. These are other words. These images have emerged from silence and stillness. I don't want to create crazy images for the words randomly. They come from inner observation. And all of these images were made in my family's garden, which became my small world during confinement. And this will be a transmedia project. My third project is Cycle. And it corresponds to another moment of my quarantine when I went to live in a permaculture farm with my partner. The idea was to relate in a deeper way with the land, learn about permaculture, agriculture, harvest some vegetables, and work in the garden. This was one of the moments in my quarantine in which I felt the most free. There is nothing like being in nature for me, and thinking about food sovereignty and food independence is something that interests me a lot and gives me hope, because I feel that only when we become fully responsible of what we eat and of our food, we can be entirely free. So these are some of the images. Also, I feel that with the pandemic, many people are becoming aware of this and are beginning to choose a slower life, perhaps away from the cities and perhaps looking for a more balanced, sustainable, and conscious way of living. So these are the images of this little project, which I then edited with my journals collective group. And my last project today is Yolanda and corresponds to my fourth stage of my quarantine last year. My aunt was called Yolanda, and in some of these photos, she must have been more or less the age I was when she died, 12 years old. As I was so young when she passed away, I have always felt I didn't really knew her. I never knew about her dreams, I never knew about her deepest longings or her fears. So when I look at her photos, I try to guess them in each of the looks she gave to the camera through her life. The process is part of that search to try to know more about her, to guess and imagine what she never told me. This project will never have happened without the pandemic, because I believe that if I hadn't had the time to be locked up with my family and to look at the photo albums, and also if I hadn't had the time, if I hadn't had in my head and in my body this question of death and absence that also brings the whole issue of COVID, I would not have dared to face this project that was in my head for a long time. Each new image that I built for this project brings me an empty feeling in my stomach, and at the same time brings me a relief. Presence and absence coexist as well as the living and the deceased, the organic and the inert. It is as if with each image, my aunt was born again, but also she dies again. Presence and absence need each other and nourish each other. The more I try to understand my aunt, the more she slips away. And this is the game that ties me, the momentary illusion of materially answering some of those transcendental, unanswerable questions. So I'm just gonna read this small part. Sometimes I would like to remember with my body the sadness I felt when she died. I understand how it hurt me, what it felt, what I missed, who her absence made me be. Of course, at the same time, I would like to continue shielded from all that pain, from that burden of feeling what one day is and then ceases to be. But these memory processes do not cease to amaze me, what we have to do to our psyche to move forward, the invisible places where we take love to be able to continue with it without stopping us. Sorry, something happened. Oh, I got stuck. Wait, I'm gonna share again to say goodbye. No, se me cerró todo. Sorry. Okay, so I was just coming to an end. So that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And you can follow me on social media if you want to. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liliana. That was really, really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing. We're going to move on to the next person who's going to be presenting. So let me get that set ready. So the next speaker is Nimas Lawla from Bali, Indonesia. And I'm going to let you go ahead and start.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for letting us present the work or our personal work during the pandemic. So my name is Nimas Lawla, and I'm an independent photojournalist based in Bali, Indonesia. My work focus on environmental issue and human rights issue across the country. And currently I'm contributing for a publication like National Geographic, New York Times, and Reuters. But this is the body of work that I created during the pandemic is really different from like my other work as a photojournalist. So this project called Inside, it is a project that explores raw emotions, ideas, and projection that I experienced during COVID-19 outbreak and isolation. My approach in documenting this are creating the pictures like out of like my intuition, really impulsive. Like when I feel something, I photograph something around me that represent what I'm feeling right at that moment. Can we go next? So these images are like a visual diary, photographing something really ordinary. You know, like as a photojournalist, I used to photograph something like a peak moment or something with a heavy story or with the happy background. And this body of work really challenged me to point the camera to myself as the one who is also affected by the pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic strangely feel like more real when I'm inside my room. So during the pandemic, I spent most of my time at my place. I remember that time it was a Bali holiday of silence. So it was one day when everyone just stay inside their home and spend 24 hours. Like it's like an Earth Day, but then it is happen not only for an hour, but it's for the whole day. So I feel like by that time also the COVID-19 hits Indonesia. I feel like that holiday of Nyepi was really never ending for months. And then this is the picture that I took the first time when I was like on voluntary isolation, and we spent our Saturday night at home. We were just watching movies together, like in our laptops. As a photojournalist, I always put other voices before my own. There was like an awkwardness and a reluctancy to point the camera to myself and to tell the story about me as the people who is also affected by the pandemic. And you know, as we know, like during like Indonesia never had a real lockdown, so the barrier was kind of like really fine between like, is it a pandemic or is it not? Because sometimes when I go outside, it doesn't look like we are in the middle of the pandemic. And I spend most of my time at home, like watching movies or just sleeping and daydreaming. In July, Indonesia has passed China in total COVID-19 cases and that, but in contrary, like the country has begun to slowly open up. I really spend my time like at the kitchen, trying to keep myself busy, trying to keep my mind occupied, because there is really huge uncertainty how this is going to end or when this is going to end. And job was like canceled, like all of my assignments was planned in 2020 was canceled. But there is this feeling like everything outside looked back to how it was. Everything looks somehow look normal, and then there is this feeling of confinement that eerily lingers to me. Like I feel like still in confinement, but when I go outside, that it is something that, you know, it looks like completely normal, as if it is like creating an unseen barrier between myself and the reality. But at the same time, it's somehow holding a bubble of safe space where I can embrace fear, anxiety, confusion, anger, and love. Next. Yeah, this is like, we know, like my obsessive collection of masks. Like I think I have like really obsessive collection of different masks that I use on daily basis. Sometimes I just photograph something like lighting that goes inside my room, and I think I need to translate like for me, like there is so much anxiety with the pandemic, and I try to like translate it into a photograph, like this confusion or like this disorientation between, like, you know, like when you have to go outside, you have to keep the measure, keep the safety measure for yourself, but at the same time, like it is feel like nobody cares about the pandemic anymore. And then when I go back home, the feeling is really intense. So I feel more like in the pandemic when I was at my home than outside. This particular picture is personally my favorite. This is a self-portrait in the beginning of the pandemic, where I spend most of my time just looking at my laptop, like watching movies, and just scrolling through social media. But at this particular moment, my feeling is transcend to my mother, who is a health consultant, which is still like occasionally helping to help in the front line. And then I feel really close to her because my body, even though we are living in separate island, but her blanket is wrapping my body that night. Next. And you know, this is one of the, I think, that translate the anxiety about like cleanliness. I never wash my chilies or my vegetable with soap. So yeah, this particular moment is also like created really impulsive. Next. And this is a self-portrait. When I woke up, I just trying to photograph like a small moments that I can remember when the pandemic has over, hopefully soon. Next. And this is my partner, which have been living together for 5 years. We spend most of our time together at home. And part of the story is also like my relationship with him. Next. This is a self-portrait of me trying to like get like a dose of sun of vitamin D, which is recommended that you have like exposure to sun to keep your immune system really good. Next. And the last picture is one of my favorite as well. This is marigold. It's called gumiter in the local language. I realized that when I planted this flower for the first time, like this is the first flower that I grown from seeds, and I was so happy to harvest the first flowers that blooms and put it on my vase to decorate my room. But I realized the more I cut it down, the more the flower blooms and the more it yields flower. And I think that relates to me is somehow like 2020, and currently we have so many challenges in our lives and our career, but then the more difficulties and the more challenge that we have, the more also we grow as a person. So that's it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this work.
Hi everyone. My name is Samyukta and I'm a documentary photographer and photojournalist based in Bangalore, India. My work sort of focuses on the vulnerable community, social inequality, the human spirit, resilience, and climate change. My work's been published in the New York Times, Bloomberg News, Der Spiegel, and a few others. So I'm going to, during the lockdown, I photographed the migrant crisis in India. So the lockdown was enforced on March 25th with only 4 hours prior notice, leaving the nation in a state of frenzy. The current government made no provisions for millions of migrant laborers working in urban centers, working in urban centers in the form of direct stimulus, leaving them unemployed. Faced with dwindling savings, the migrants made the decision to return to their hometowns from cities around India, sparking the biggest human exodus in India since the partition. Um, Initially, the Karnataka government stopped train services for migrant workers after meeting with builders, since the builders feared that the reverse migration would impact construction in the state. During the meeting, the builders and contractors had assured the government that they would take care of laborers, a responsibility most of them had not shouldered at first. But after heavy criticism from trade unions, the opposition, and social media, the Karnataka government decided to reopen train and bus services for the migrants. So each day, a group from one state was sent back. After relevant documents and health check, the migrant workers were issued train tickets to their hometown, and then they boarded buses to the train stations outside the city. So the first set of images was on May 23rd, where migrant workers from Orissa had registered to return to their hometowns, and the government had sent them a message saying that train services were scheduled on the 23rd. But this message was sent on WhatsApp to other migrant workers from Orissa. So around 7,000 of them, 7,000 people showed up at Palace grounds, and with the train capacity of only 1,500, many of them had to stay back, and the government had to make arrangements the next day as well. Here, there were a lot of volunteers who also came out to help and provide the migrant workers with water as well as food. This was on May 21st when migrant workers from Chhattisgarh were due to leave. And many of them showed up the previous night and stayed overnight on the footpaths in the fear that they would miss their trains. Um, this this sorry. This is Guttu Kumar Giri, who worked as a car part dealer with no money left as he had lost his job. He spent 10 days sleeping on the streets, and he arrived hoping to catch a train back to his hometown. After relevant checks, like health checks and documents, they lined up in order to catch the bus and then trains to their hometown. These were they were police officers who gave out free masks to the migrant workers. Oh, we can go next. Yeah, these were volunteers helping out. This was a migrant worker carrying a loaf of bread for his journey back home. Little kids and their families who spent the night on the footpath with the hope of catching the train back. This was breakfast, and here documents were being checked to make before they boarded the train. This was his name was Sabriwala Chand, and he was a housekeeper, but lost his job due to the lockdown, and he couldn't afford to live in Bangalore anymore. Temperatures were checked before they were allowed to get on buses and trains. Here's a police officer who were helping, who helped with filling up documents. Mahindra was working at a wedding hall, and he lost his job. These were the buses that were arranged to take them to the train stations outside the city. During the pandemic, I also started going out on hikes with a small group of friends. It felt like an escape from the current situation. It was nice to sort of get out of the city, get some fresh air, and soak up all the nature. I also use these hikes to sort of get over my fear of heights, as well as anxious moments during the pandemic. Um, Earlier, going out before the pandemic, going out meant going out with friends to either restaurants, movie theaters, or each other's homes. Since the pandemic, I found a new way of meeting friends and also a new way of seeing the city, which I hadn't done before. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for this opportunity and so nice to see all of your work. And now I'm feeling so happy to reflect our 2020. I'm Bista. I'm from Kathmandu, Nepal. I'm a documentary photographer and photojournalist working for daily newspaper here in Kathmandu. And mostly I work on the gender issues, like issues around myself, and then this around the women issues. Most of my personal projects are. And the work I'm sharing today is the different kind of the visuals which helped me to heal myself on the 2020. And I'm like, this is the first time I'm sharing this work. Uh, like in March, like I was in the far west region for my work. I was traveling, and then there, like people, like there was rumor in the city, like government is going to lockdown, and then so many things. But it was so normal in the village, and then everyone is saying that, oh, you are the people from outside, you are like taking corona here or something, like they was joking. Then it was so normal, and then I came back, and like the situation was so like uh, difficult, and then everyone is that panic, and then I started getting panic, and then I don't know how to handle that, and it was so difficult time. And then after some days the lockdown happened, and like I had to go out for the shoot for my newspaper. And that street like became so different, like it was kind of so imaginary city the Kathmandu became at that time. And then these birds in the street we can see only birds and dogs are there. And in the first lockdown the government, like the rules are so uh, tight, and then no one can do a morning walk or go for the shopping, like necessary things. It was so difficult. And then these images I'm sharing now is the images like which give me the this space to heal, and also the little things which I can feel comfortable or something. I can engage myself, like the Arundhati Roy's one quote I really relate on myself and this body of work. There is like, the year was full of thoughts and things to say, but at times like this, only the small things are ever said. Big things lurk unsaid inside. And these things, small like things, the moment change like within a second. And like it was so difficult in the beginning days, and then slowly I got engaged with other things. I was in fellowship, and I was doing other course which helped me to engage and then do everything, like being inside one room and then being in front of screen that really help me like come out of this thing. And I was the one who are like so much panic in my family. And like I live in Kathmandu, and my home is quite uh, far from the main city, and we are more free to go out, and we have more open space. And then uh, uh, it was not kind of strict lockdown for us, because like we had this privilege because of our this area. And like inside in the beginning days, inside me there was so much pain and so much anxiety. And then I like through my like images, uh, I started to like convince myself. uh, yeah, go next. Can you go next? Yeah. I, that I also got like chance to see things very closely. Like I spent time with my family after, so like I was like all of the time I was outside, like on the daytime here and there, and it was not proper, this family time. I realized that time, and I got chance to give time. And then we every day we had the food with like together, and it was kind of uh, different relationship built up. And then I spent time with my nieces. They are like, they like to play with me. And then it was so like this little moment give me the space to you know uh, just come out from that whole this pandemic, and then just escape from this pain, trauma, and then uncertainty. And then like I go to like little small hike with my sister, with my nieces, and we just try to heal ourselves, like do small things and cook food, and then eat together. And like for me personally, because I have to go out, and then um, I have to also think about my family, because I'm the one who are going out every day. It was also difficult for me to handle that time. And this image particularly from the like that time, it was the festival time. And then Kathmandu Valley is like mostly known for so many different festival every month. And because of the pandemic, most of the festival didn't happen. And it was and this chariot made by the local kids, and they made by this like their toys things. And they also did the rituals like exactly like the main festival. Like they did all the ceremonies. It was the children, it did by the children, but it was like these little things they perform. And they are very confident. They were very confident that, oh, we did this because nothing will happen. Like they are very, people are very like they believe on this festival rituals and religion, and they kind of perform this, and that help. And this is also the place where the one of the biggest festival uh, happened. And it was very like silent city that last year. And these are the kids whose parents were waiting to go their home in the park, and they were staying overnight at that park. And the kids are got chance to play there, and their parents were so panicked. Like they were, so many people was going their home by food. And then after some days, like some local people in the Kathmandu, they organize, they voluntarily to like food, and then they manage the transportation, and they got chance to go by the uh, vehicle. And before that, so many people like travel by foot miles and miles from the Kathmandu Valley. and she's my niece. I feel so lucky to like observe them very closely. They're like they are growing like the kids are so like uh, they create so like the environment for us to escape from this whole like old scenario, and it like it is the good moment for me to see and observe them. The people are traveling to their home, and they were wearing mask, gloves, and even like people never wear these things. They was like they were saying that, oh, it feels kind of so suffocation wearing masks, and it was so uncomfortable for them, but they accept and they try to wear masks for all the time. And like most of them was like the old people who never wore masks on their life, and they feels like so suffocating because wearing masks and put gloves on their hand, it was uneasy for them. And sometimes I observe my niece's kind of playful moment. They eh, like their school was closed, and they was very eager to see their teachers, their friends, and they wanted to go back to school, but it was not like that moment. And I observed them, their playful moment, uh, their needs, they what they wanted, and on that time, and how they accept these things very easily. Like for us, for adult, it is quite difficult to accept the moment, but they are like quite go with the flow. And the relationship with animal and the uh, our pets, it's also very uh, intimate, and also uh, like very important for all of us. And they add more extra like moment, extra uh, happiness for in our life. The empty street on in Kathmandu on that lockdown period. And these like how kids try to make moment in every every things. Like we were in hike, and she find that pipe, and she started, oh, I want to do a concert, and I'll sing song. And this is the moment, like I said the before, like kids are the main source for me to heal and to cope with the pandemic. And that is they are the main source for uh, me to overcome with these things and got engaged with other things. And yeah, it was uh, really strange year, and then it was so kind of no one imagined that year, and it was kind of very a, different, but we kind of passed that difficult stage, and now we are uh, accepted this all things, and we are going with flow. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Uma. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Brooke Herbert. I am currently based in Portland, Oregon, in the USA. I'll be shortly moving to Delhi in just about 3 weeks. So for the past 2 years, I've been a filmmaker and photographer at a newspaper in Portland called the Oregonian. So I've been doing daily assignments. I've been doing a lot of video, but during the pandemic, I did also start to do a lot more photography. So what I'm going to share is just little snippets of work from kind of three different things I worked on throughout the pandemic. Kind of as everyone has said, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, in March, when, you know, it hit kind of the west coast of the US and everyone kind of went into shutdown, I was apart from my husband. So I had moved to Portland, Oregon, for this job, and my husband was supposed to join me, but unfortunately he's an Indian citizen, so he was sent back to India from Customs and Border Protection, and so he was unable to join me in the US. So during the beginning of lockdown, what I was really feeling was a deep sense of like sadness and longing, because I was apart from my husband. He was in Bangalore at the time. I was in Portland. And I kind of, I was at a little bit of a sense of loss because I just didn't know what to do with my time, because the pandemic was so new and scary that even at the newspaper, they were really reluctant to send us out on many assignments. So I started kind of making work from my house at the very beginning. And these images are really from like the first couple of weeks. This is just a view out my living room window at my neighbor's house. Just everyone was inside and shut off from each other. And I felt really, at the same time, completely shut off from my husband, who we had just gotten married in January, and these images were in March. And so I just felt really far from him. I spent a lot of time in my bed alone, just feeling, you know, unsure of what was going to come next and when we would see each other again. After travel restrictions came into play, I couldn't go see him, he couldn't see me. So it just felt like a bit of a limbo period. I just spent a lot of time in my house, and I wrote a lot too during this time, because I had kind of gotten this very small house for me and him to share, and he never joined me in this house. He's still in India. So I would keep this is my bedside table. So that's just me and him on a hike, actually, in the United States a few years ago. So this I'm kind of going to transition. Again, I'm going to show work from just a few projects that I worked on. This is just to kind of transition into the time where I did start going out on a lot of assignments for the newspaper. And at first it was really, really scary because of the pandemic and because of possible exposure to the virus. You know, we just constantly carried masks around. This is just one of my masks hanging from my rearview mirror. I would kind of store them there when I was driving around on assignment. I was also going on like really long kind of introspective walks around my neighborhood. And these are some pieces of video footage from my neighborhood. It was really bizarre because it was the beginning of the pandemic. It was springtime in Portland, and it was just so beautiful that I would walk around and think like, this time is so, so beautiful. Everything is blooming, but it felt like also a very, very scary and sad time. In early May, or actually, sorry, in late May, is when things kind of really started to change in Portland. And in the US, in cities all over the US. In the end of May, a man named George Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis. And that set off a wave of kind of an unprecedented social justice movement, movement for racial justice. There were widespread protests all over the US. And Portland has a history of being a big protest city in normal times. Portland is full of a lot of activists. And so some of these images I'm going to show are from kind of the very beginning of these protests in Portland, which ended up stretching on until very recently. Only recently they've kind of started to trickle off, but there would be thousands and thousands of people that would march every single night through Portland, just chanting, you know, George Floyd's name, chanting Black Lives Matter. It was really, really at this time, this like really powerful movement. And I was just photographing, you know, for the newspaper. So I was just trying to find a way to like capture the enormity of this moment, which was really hard to do. But I did see a lot of tender moments, you know, like this, like people kind of started to look at Portland as this wild city where protesters were taking over. But a lot of what I saw was stuff like this, was like a lot of love and a lot of people kind of coming out to just show that they believe that Black Lives Matter. So that's what a lot of these images are. This is kind of the main square in downtown Portland, and there were about 10,000 people here this night, and it just, I've never seen anything like it. Just to see that many people there, you know, their fists raised, and this is kind of the symbol for Black Lives Matter. This fist kind of became just the symbol of that. Very quickly, in the protests, the Portland police responded quite dramatically. This is just an image of that same night, actually, of where the police came out and just, they really tear gassed a lot. There were some groups of protesters who would bust windows occasionally. They did light some small fires, and the Portland police kind of responded in this very, very big way. They would kind of rush the streets with batons, throwing tear gas canisters, and a lot of the protesters would just be sent kind of running. So this was the method that, you know, the police used to disperse the crowds, and it happened from the very beginning. This image was from one of the marches as well. A huge group was marching over one of the main bridges into downtown Portland, and in the center is Damian Lillard, who's actually a very well-known basketball player, and he just kind of showed up and joined the march, not trying to make a publicity stunt. I think it was just another example of kind of this really like big sense of togetherness as they marched into the city. This kind of elk became really an iconic part of the protests early on. This is also in the center of Portland. And this was such an interesting time because, again, we had gone from being in this pandemic where everyone was kind of siloed and by themselves to suddenly everyone is together, but somehow that like fear of the pandemic kind of was dissipating, like because people were so involved in this movement. So they're coming out, you know, fully masked, but still marching every day. And this is just, you know, the burning of the American flag, you know, and what that symbolizes. This kind of became a nightly flashpoint in downtown Portland. They would also march outside of downtown Portland into neighborhoods where the police again would respond to these protesters with rubber bullets, with tear gas. And then there would be these clashes, which were between basically right-wing Trump supporters and also the Black Lives Matter protesters on the other side. So this is from a day where they kind of faced off in downtown Portland, and it became very volatile very quickly. This is kind of like on the right side, you can kind of see what I would say was kind of the right wing side, and then on the left here is a protester in what's called Black Bloc. A lot of the protesters from the left would dress in all black to kind of conceal their identity. They carried black umbrellas. And by this point in the protest, people would show up to protest with full gas masks. And here they're pepper spraying each other from across a vehicle. More scenes from that day. These are people praying with a woman. I would get a little scared when tear gas and would go off and people would start running. And so I sometimes made these like really chaotic kind of images, or like, you know, just running away, but small moments could kind of be captured. This is just from a neighborhood in Portland after the crowd had been dispersed by police. I want to show just 1 minute of a, I ended up doing a lot of video during that time, and made a short documentary kind of about some of the protests. And I just wanted to quickly show the first minute of that video here.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
That we have never ever been in our society before. America understands that our policing system is broken and that we need radical change.
Portland, Oregon, of all places, still one of the widest major places in our entire country, being at the center of the national imagination around the Black Lives Matter movement.
It must be something going on where all these white people are woke and they're feeling what Black people feel. George Floyd's death represented police brutality. I am no one out there. I am a random person who saw George Floyd's video and couldn't sleep.
There's been a lot of narratives around peaceful, non-peaceful, violent, non-violent, and every protest is a voice to be unheard.
If you think to yourself, like looking at the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, oh, I would have marched, I would have been at Selma, then you should be in the streets now, because that's what we're doing.
So that was just the first minute of what's a 20-minute documentary, kind of just documenting the first 100 days of protest in Portland. So I can share a link to that too. And just to quickly kind of wrap up my portion, the next kind of part of the year, and what I've put as like part 3 was the kind of like unprecedented wildfires that spread through the West Coast. So we had just gone through, you know, we were going through this pandemic. We were going through these like protests that had gone on for over 100 days. And then suddenly the entire West Coast is on fire. And so we were sent out to document that, and I kind of drove through Central Oregon, covering one specific area that was pretty badly affected. So I'm just going to share a few images from that fire season. People had to evacuate their homes with their horses. This was a really rural part of Oregon. So a lot of people left with their animals. The sky was just orange for days and days. This was a town we toured through, which had been completely destroyed pretty much in the fire. A lot of homes were burned. This was the gymnasium of a school, which burned down. This is actually a senator in Oregon who came home to find his home completely gone. That's his chimney to the right of him. Just more people who had been evacuating their homes. This is a generator running some power. and people were still kind of coming out to feed their animals. So this was someone's horse kind of just in a field of smoke. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry, I went a little over. And I'll hand it over to Iman. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now.
You are mute, Iman.
I think you're on mute, Iman.
Oh, hi. I know my camera is blurry, but I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Okay. Do you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so my name is Iman. I'm a documentary photographer and photojournalist based in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Basically, what I'm gonna be showing is, my personal work. So I do work as a photojournalist for publications. I've been published in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Spiegel, and more. And I do work on personal documentary pieces. But during the pandemic, in Saudi Arabia, everything went in lockdown very quickly and early on, like in early March. And I think the first thing that happened was that schools closed. I remember it was March 8 or 9, something like that, schools closed. And then they switched to online distance learning. And then the week after, airports closed. And my mother was abroad, and she's been abroad for a year now. I haven't seen her for over a year. My father's here, my mother is in LA. And I live in a multi-generational kind of home with my in-laws. And I visit my father not too much because he's he's kind of sick, so he's not it's not good to expose my daughter to him too much, but we visit as much as we can. So I'll be showing some images mostly from the time spent in lockdown during the beginning and pretty much all of 2020, before March and over. And I'll show you some from when the lockdown was lifted, and then we were able to go out and socialize again. Okay. So here are images of my daughter and how at the beginning of the lockdown, it was a bit frustrating, like no school, but online school. And I think every parent experienced this frustration at the very start, especially if you have kids that are elementary school age. And, the first month or two, it was, every parent will tell you it was madness. 7-year-olds do not know how to use email or Google Meet or any of this, but then they caught on, and, so far, right now, my daughter can do everything on her own, so it's not a problem anymore. But looking at these images reminds me of all these days of frustration. This image here is when I would visit my dad, and my daughter would sleep next to me in bed. And, I started photographing more indoors. Usually my work is outside, photographing other people. I do photograph my daughter a lot, but then there are some details and little things that I noticed more and I was looking at more. So this is one image from when she was sleeping next to me. This is her doing online school. A lot of staring at the screen. This is doing homework. Excessive hand washing. we spent a lot of time at my in-laws' pool. So that was a really good thing to have during lockdown, because we had different kinds of between March and June. Some had curfews. Sometimes we had curfews at 3 or 5 or 7. It always was changing here in Saudi Arabia. But we felt lucky to have a pool. This was like the only thing that, you know, that really made us happy at the time, or less frustrated at the time. And, you know, my daughter's an only daughter. She has a cousin who visited. So they would hang out a bit sometimes. I mean, he's much older, so it was, you know, they fight all the time. So that was difficult, but at least entertaining. But most of the time she was indoors playing alone, or with me and her dad. But it was good to be with I'm thankful we were with family, because otherwise I think the three of us would have gone crazy, which brings me to this picture. This was, I think, a week after homeschool, and she was doing fine, or maybe 2 weeks, and she was doing fine up until that moment when she just broke down and she's like, I'm done. This is us celebrating my brother's birthday, who lives in LA, of course, on a FaceTime video call. This is a little video. Oh, okay. It didn't play, but it's a video. Here's my husband doing work from home. And this was like the new normal now, or then and now. Going to the supermarket was an ordeal. It was like war, basically. So the rare times when we actually did go shopping, it was very frustrating and difficult. So we ended up doing lots of shopping online eventually. Here's the family having dinner. Ramadan started during the pandemic, so in April we had a curfew at 5 p.m. I think, so we had to do all your shopping or whatever you needed before then to get on time at 6 o'clock for the Maghrib prayer, which was the time when you would break the fast. Tried to do some yoga. My friend teaches yoga, so tried a little bit here and there. I can't say I actually continued. This is our next door neighbor, exercising outside on her rooftop and me socializing with her. This was one way to interact with other humans during the lockdown, like the 24-hour lockdown. So here, at this point, I went to my dad's because it was after Ramadan, you have the Eid celebration, and I didn't want him to be alone. So we decided, me and daughter, we go and stay with him and prepare for a 5 or 6 day, 24-hour lockdown. There was a time when it was a 24-hour, you cannot leave your house. So during this time, it was just, you know, the three of us, me and my daughter, or the four of us actually, there's a helper too. And so our neighbor is also where my dad lives is also our relative, and she's 2 years older than my daughter. So my daughter kept wanting to go see her, but in the beginning, it was very difficult for me to let her. And here she's just looking at her window and, you know, saying, you know, asking me why can't she see her? And I try to explain. She knows why, but, you know, kids. So I think a week later or a few days later, I finally eventually let her after, I think it was 2 months of not seeing any friend at all, like no school friends, no relatives, other than her cousin that visits the house. So here's the relative from her window and my daughter taking a picture of her. And then eventually, like, okay, I was like, okay, you can go. And then eventually when, you know, the curfew was lifted and we could walk around, like this was a scene from a neighborhood and there were no kids playing, even though the weather was amazing. Like we have maybe about 4 or 5 months of good weather here, and then the rest of the time it's really hot. This is my daughter just being concentrated, being creative, doing her thing. Again, being creative with her toys. We baked a lot. This is my father. He's actually looking at his phone. You can't see it. Talking to my mom on FaceTime. My dad didn't really leave the house much other than just for important reasons. But eventually when Eid came and we, you know, I convinced him that we go visit relatives at least, or at least our relative neighbor. So he did. And then otherwise we would just go in a ride with him and go and visit and, you know, other relatives. So here we're visiting his cousin, and of course he had to smoke. So, and this is his cousin with the beard that was never there before, because all the you know, I guess a lot of people grew their beard and hair most of the time because barbershops were closed and all these places were closed. So this is my daughter and her relative during our Eid. This is when we visited my cousins, and we would just say hi from the car or outside. These are my neighbor and one of my friend's dogs. She was visiting her mother. She was, you know, she got stuck in another city visiting her mother, and these are her pets. So we would go visit them. My uncle, auntie, and cousin. So this is basically I decided to go visit some friends and just chat from outside and do these window portraits. And it made me really focus on how beautiful some buildings are in the city. And I never noticed them before, honestly. I'd never looked. And this is my friend and her baby who was born like right before the pandemic. Another friend. Same friend with her son on the rooftop. Our neighbor at my dad's and her kids. Here's my daughter in the sea. This is after they opened up the city. Oops, I clicked too soon. Basically, it's my birthday, and my 40th birthday, and I really wanted to celebrate. I had imagined being somewhere on an island or having a party, a big party for my 40th, but it was just the three of us celebrating. We actually rented a spot on the sea, on the Red Sea, and again, swimming was one, you know, outlet for us. And then slowly we decided to go and visit friends or, you know, people. So this is at a farm. My friend has horses, and so we tried to go and do something outside, some activity. Visiting the aquarium, meeting up with friends again. These were how the streets look. This is like a very popular street, and usually it's very, very crowded, but that's how it looked like during the pandemic. The rare times when we actually went out and did some activities outside. This was the beginning of me actually finally like getting out and doing something different. I went with a bunch of women. These are from two different trips. One in Riyadh and one in the south of Saudi Arabia. So we decided to take some trips and do internal tourism, because usually here, us in Saudi, we just go outside of the country, but now that the whole country has been locked since a year ago, we've decided to, just explore our own country. This is another trip that we took a little bit outside of the city. My daughter and one of her relatives finally meeting up after months of not seeing each other. And then my daughter's birthday. It was a small, considering what we usually do, it's a small birthday with only 8 girls. And that is it. Okay. Yeah.
And we just have one more speaker, and that's June. And she's going to go ahead and share her screen and will be our last presenter for tonight.
Hi. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay? Okay, good. So, hi everyone. My name is Watsamon Tri-yasakda, or you can call me June as well. I'm a photographer and visual storyteller based in Bangkok, Thailand. So just like anyone else, my 2020 was quite a weird year. And I will present my photo of 2020, cover story during the pandemic in kind of like timeline. So I feel like my 2020 was kind of like divided into 2 parts. The first part would be the pandemic, just like anywhere else in the world. Bangkok also affected by the COVID-19. But the second half of the year was kind of like unexpected, which I will go over later on. So in Bangkok, we actually have the first case of COVID patient. Actually, I think we were the first city to find a new case outside of China mainland in January. And the first one in who is the Thai person is actually later in the month. But our government, because at that time we didn't have that much data, and then we thought it just like would not be as deadly as it is now. So we were, even though because of uncertainty and lack of data, life still go on even in February after we found the first few cases in Thailand. So looking back, it's quite strange to see even in February when we found the new cases, we still have the LGBT pride. This when in Pattaya, at early February, while the new cases happening, people still try to live the life as normal as possible. And then jumping to March, I think now many countries in the world have been affected, not only in Thailand. But actually, what is not seen in the photo in February is that many people wear masks everywhere as well, especially in Bangkok, because we are like Thai people are actually used to wear masks in public. because we have been suffer from the air pollution like PM 2.5 for a few years. So it's totally normal to see people wearing masks in the public places or in public transportation. And even that time, like the WHO didn't recommend people to wear masks yet, but Thai people, we are quite afraid of situation. And some of the government like Taiwan also recommends to do so. So it's like, why not? And in March, the summer hit in Bangkok. This is the photo I took like nearby shopping mall. It's quite strange to look back that at that time we were more worried about the heat wave than the pandemic. And then, you know, we saw the news from anywhere else as well, like how people went crazy, the supermarket have very messy. Like for me, you know, Bangkok, we can easily find food anywhere. Every corner of the street, there are like everything you want to eat, you can find it. So for me, this was like the first time ever to see kind of like empty shelf in supermarket, because normally it's always be filled. And even though the government say not to worry, not to stock up, and it's happened anyway. And at that time, a lot of I think the airports was closed in March. Even though we have the first case in January, the government was like, oh, we would be fine. So we actually closed the country quite late, because, you know, at the beginning of the year, it was actually the high season. They thought it was going to be all right. So, and then suddenly like the airport was empty, you know, all the flight was canceled. And you see, you know, people wear a protective gear, fully days, like maybe going back home. This is something that you would not see. And then you will see like the huge line of airplane just staring there. And also what happened in March is that we didn't have lockdown yet, but they closed down like the shopping mall, and a lot of factory and office, they also ask people to work at home is possible. So what happened when they closed down the shopping mall and restaurant is that there are the huge demand of the food delivery happening. So at that time, the only people who would go to the shopping mall or supermarket would be either food delivery guy or you just want something very quick. But most people would prefer to stay at home and order something online as well. So this is quite a usual scene at the shopping mall, that you will see many of the delivery person waiting in line for their food. Normally, all the shopping mall would be filled with people. And then like in April, like three or 4 months after we found the first case, and we could not, I think the government feel like they could not control the situation. So finally they have the lockdown at the beginning of April. This photo was taken at in the heart of business district, which would usually at this time around like 7-8 p.m. would be the most busiest. If you come to Bangkok and take the photo at the intersection, put in the Instagram, there would be the location hashtag as like the most the longest traffic intersection in Bangkok. So for me to be out in the city while most people stay at home, and to witness like the emptiness of Bangkok that we normally would say that Bangkok is the city never sleep, but to witness the city as like quite early night at 7 p.m. and it's almost empty is quite such a strange feeling, you know, just like this is like a zombie movie or something like that. And as I mentioned, Thai people, we wear masks everywhere. And I think in later, like March or April, is actually become required. If you go outside, you have to wear masks. Like otherwise, you would be declined from entering like building or using public transportation. And as I mentioned earlier, it's quite strange to, you know, if you've been to the airport, normally it would be busy. You hardly see any birds. So at that time, I went on another assignment at the airport, and to witness this scene is just add to more strain. And if you visit Bangkok, you would have been to the Grand Palace, which is like one of the top travel destination. It was closed, but then because at that time, like the gym and people cannot go exercise at like the places like the gym. So the travel destination like around the Grand Parade actually become where people running in the evening for exercise. And some of factory actually adapt themselves or transfer themselves to keep up with the situation. For like this one, I was on as an assignment at the underwear factory that actually use their material to make more face masks, because at that time they were a shortage situation of the face mask that we don't have now of that. And even though during the pandemic, it was such a difficult time for everyone, right? But then I still see this act of giving, the kindness among the people, you know. At that time, it's not only that we are facing with the situation that nobody have been in before, but many people lose their job. A lot of people have been forced to live the life that they didn't plan. For me as a photographer to witness this kind of act, kind of like at least warm up my, you know, my heart in a way. Like for the first one is at the local park that they give out the vegetable for people to grow at home and to eat. And, you know, majority of people in Thailand are Buddhist, right? And normally in the morning we would give the offering to the monk. But then during this time, a lot of people actually donate food through the monk for the temple to actually giving back to the people who are in need. And also I witness people, even though many people are afraid to go outside of their home, but they are the lack of blood donation. So they still, people like take the courage to be out of their home and give back and donate to another. And the last photo is actually from the Pantry of Sharing project. I think the idea was actually come from the US, that maybe a house or the business would set up the pantry in front on the street, and then people and anyone can fill up, and if you are the people in need, you can take, and then people can share, and something like this go on. And then come in May, the curfew was lifted and we can eat back at the restaurant again. But then the government put on quite a strict regulation that you have to keep social distancing even though while eating. So many shop owner, many restaurants have to come doing something more creative, to get people to eat outside. They put on the stuffed animal like the panda or a dragon at the barbecue place, because at that time they kind of like force people to eat alone, even though you come in group. So I think the shop owner say that at least you have someone or something cute to sit next to you, so you would not feel so lonely. And we have to get used to the new normal way of living. So this is how you shopping for lipstick during the pandemic. And one of the business that have been closed throughout the pandemic was the cinema. So this at the local cinema, and they put up some, I think it's UVC light for the reopen preparation. And even during the pandemic, that most of my work would be for the local online media that I work for. And I also try to come up with something that not very new in a way. For this one, in Thailand, before you enter any building, you would have to get the temperature check, and then you get this little sticker on. And then most people, I think a lot of people, maybe like for me, I often forgot it on my shirt. But then I look at some of the public space that kind of become like a canvas for people to create. So you can decide for yourself whether it's kind of like the vandalism or it's become like the art. And then come at in June, we also have the Black Lives Matter protest as well, but it took place online. At that time, people are still, I think the big gathering was still banned from the government. Like you cannot be outside together more than 5 people or 10. But then later in June, there were less restrictions. So it was my first time to be out of Bangkok. This was in Pattaya. And I think the government hoped that the local tourism would come back. And then come the 1st of July, the school reopened again, but then the student would be required to wear masks all the time. And they put up the face shield, like the shield between the student to keep them social distance. And then we have like the outdoor cinema, the party come back again. And then come the second part, like big part of my 2020 was the ongoing protest led by the student. The protest, because in July, we have been suffer economically from the pandemic for 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 months. And we actually have been under the military government, even though we have the election the year before that. But still, we got the same leader. And it has been a hard, long period under the military government. So many students feel hopeless. And then come the pandemic with make everything was work. So they feel like it's time for them to go out on the street and protest the government. This photo was actually the first time I see LGBT pride flag on the street of Bangkok. Even though Thailand was known to be the most tolerant place for LGBT, but Bangkok didn't have pride for such a long time. I never been to one, so yeah, this was a special moment for me. And then the protests continue like almost every day, every weekend. They also get more creative. A lot of protesters also got very young. For this protest, they used the Japanese animation to be the theme. You also might see on the news that we have like Harry Potter theme protest as well. And then not only the university students took the street to protest, they also, the younger one, like the one in high school or even primary school, also went on to Ministry of Education to ask for the better curriculum and to be less strict for about the student uniform. And then the protests still go on in August. You might notice that not only they were very creative, you know. Not only they used the three finger salute, which we adopted from the Hunger Game movie, and it has been used as a sign against the military government for a few years. They also add on like the white ribbon to be the symbol of solidarity against the authority. And the protest, the photo that I took in Chiang Mai, we did outside of Bangkok. The protest was taken place anywhere, and I think last year there were like hundreds of protests happening around the country, not only in Bangkok. But because of still we are in pandemic era, so it's quite hard to cover anywhere. But then I think it's good that the protests kind of like spread out, so each local organization can organize their own. And even in Bangkok, there were many student organization group. This from the 19th of September. I think it was recorded as the biggest protest last year. I think they have almost 200,000 people gathered up. And behind them were the scene of the Grand Palace. And the protest was continued in October, and many people still took the street to protest. I think when it's come to October, even though there were several protest organized group, they agree on the same three demand, because each group would have different demand to the government. So the three demand that they agree upon are, the first would be the resignation of the current prime minister, who was also the leader of the military government who did the coup d'etat, overthrown the previous elected government. The second one would be the new draft of constitution, because the current constitution that we are using now actually in favor of the military government. And the third would be something would considered as something unspeakable before, but in which was the reform of the monarchy, because in Thailand we still have the less majesty law. You can see even though the protests go on for 3 months, there's still a lot of people who join the protests. And this is one of the, I think you can say the turning point of the protest is that before the protest was very peaceful, you know, it's the student-led movement. Normally they would have like the High Park, they would march around the city, and this one is no different. They gather up at Siam area, which like the downtown of Bangkok. The night begin with very peaceful. You can see a lot of students who are still in their uniform join up. And then suddenly the police used the big water cannon to stop the protest. Even though there were no weapon, the scene was very peaceful. And at this scene, like the unarmed protester tried to stop the water cannon used by the police, which is actually mixed with the tear gas to not come to the intersection where like 10,000 of people gathering. Even then, even though the violence happened, the police brutality, but still the student and other protesters did not give up. This is the photo that you can see that they are actually come straight from the school to join the protest. And the gear.
This is Rekha. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Actually, we're running a little bit over time, and there are a couple of questions. So, would you be able to wind up so that we could take these questions and just give everybody a chance to respond to it? Because this is a general question that applies to everybody, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I think.
Please just take a couple of minutes to wind up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. As the protests continue, even in November, they're getting more creative, and the police still keep using the way to stop the people. This is the scene at Democracy Monument, and it's come December, the protest actually took on the pause because, you know, at the student, they have the exam season coming up. And also we have the second wave of COVID. So all the restriction become strict again. And also many of the protest leaders got arrested. As I mentioned, that we still have the less majesty law, and the police and authority use that to try to stop the protest. So I would like to end my slide with the photo of the 30th of December of 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, June, and sorry about having to ask you to, because people are leaving. It's getting a little bit later here. There is one question. I could read that out. It's to all panelists, so maybe a couple of you could respond. Journalism, especially photojournalism, is a powerful medium of communicating information, emotions, private and public lives, and a lot more. Whether it's a close look at an individual experience or what others showed through their works, COVID turned a lot upside down. Were there moments when you felt that your gaze was becoming representational of an individual or a collective experience? You can just take a couple of minutes each to respond to that. I think that would be great.
I can go first. So yeah, to answer the question is that when the beginning of the pandemic, there is like this collective action. The journal is starting to build up, and then I was trying to join to the journal, and I think like all of the picture like represent in the journal is something that is really personal and unique, and somehow like from this presentation I presented a photograph of the bed, and then Brooke also presented the same type of photograph. So it is something really transcend through like time and places that we experience similar things, and we might have also photographed like similar things to like express our feelings.
And just to kind of go off what Nyimas was saying, I think yeah, I definitely felt that at the beginning too with the really like personal imagery. It's so interesting to see all of our work together and the work of the collective in general, because there were so many themes that I kept seeing being repeated, even in these like completely different places all over the world. And then I think the person also asked about like, as far as a collective experience, I definitely think that was like on my mind a lot. And I wonder if it was for June or for Samyukta as well, when you're covering these like bigger issues during the pandemic of like protests or the migrant crisis. Yeah, I was trying to be really cognizant of making sure that I didn't, especially when covering Black Lives Matter protesters, that I didn't try to say like all protesters are like this or all protesters are like this. Like it's not one like monolith. And that was kind of hard to do because I didn't want the pictures to really be about my gaze at all. I wanted it to be about the experience of the protesters and what people were feeling. So I think that's a really interesting question, because even as a photojournalist in general, you're always thinking about like how the pictures are not only representing the voice of the person you're photographing, but they're obviously going to include your voice as well. So it's always like, at least for me, it's like a balancing act. But I'd be curious, you know, like how anyone else feels about that.
Hi, I think that at the end, the collective and individual experiences are closely related. And I think that during this time of confinement, the act of going inward is a personal experience, but it is also a collective experience that we are all living separately, but it is still collective. So in that order of ideas, I think that yes, maybe all of these images we are doing are representational of what we as humanity are living. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Like everyone saying that we were looking outside before the pandemic. Like we was also looking inward, but this pandemic gave us a chance to like go and like explore and show our inward things. And this is like individual, that like everyone is doing individually, but it is so common everywhere, and it's became more collective.
Yeah, especially while photographing more of my personal life, I realized a lot of it is also collective, because a lot of us were going through the same experiences of anxiety and fear. So yeah, and yeah, I also think, I think it's both of an individual as well as collective experience. Um, yeah.
I think I agree with everyone. Even though I didn't get to have work from home experience. Like I would work outside almost every day. But looking through the photo from the collective is that even though I didn't have a chance to, take the photo of myself at home, or, to turn another way around, like looking for or exploring on the inside, like many people. But looking through those images, I agree, it's kind of like collective experience, is that I also feel the same emotion, or I can connect to many photos, even though I didn't get to, even though I didn't take that kind of photo, but I can share or feel the connection. And for me, while I was taking the photo at the protest, I think I actually have to confess that I was more focused on the experience that I have covering the protest, or focusing on what is happening at the protest. And I didn't actually thinking whether about this might, my guest or whoever else at that time, because like for me, I grew up with the ongoing conflict of another protest that I witnessed before. But then when I enter my field, I actually cover more on the, lifestyle and culture section for the website. But for last year, because of the lockdown, there are not as many assignments, so I held out on the new. So it was my first time actually to experience what it's like to be on the field at the protest, and the first time experience the tear gas and everything. So for me, it's kind of like it's kind of like shoot without thinking, in a way that you kind of like live on your experience. And yeah, I'm not sure whether it's answering the question. Yeah, but it's kind of like you work on your instinct in the way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for responding to the question that we had on chat. If you're all done responding, I think we've basically answered whatever people have asked. Thank you all so much for really giving us a glimpse of your lives and everything that happened in your cities. And photos are such a powerful medium. Really sort of helps everybody connect to different places, different realities. So thank you so much for taking the time. Such amazing work. And with that, we come to the end of day one of City Scripts. Thank you everyone for logging in, and we hope to see all of you back here tomorrow. Thank you so much again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.